Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Darlene Rossetti, the Regional Superintendent of Schools for DuPage County, and welcome to The Time Is Now with Dr. Greg Wolcott. I think it's a very profound title, given everything that is going on right now, and we're delighted to be offering this opportunity to you. We are being live streamed right now on the DuPage County YouTube channel, so please join us. We will be monitoring as well our email, and you can email us questions to dupagestrong@dupageroe.org. That is DuPage Strong, one word, at dupageroe.org. So please feel free to send us any questions you have. We'll save some time at the very end to answer some of those questions. So again, I want to thank you and welcome you, all of you, for being with us here this evening. You know, this is a very challenging time in our country today. Very challenging time in our state, in our counties, in our communities, and certainly for our schools as well. I know that our schools have done a tremendous job, even over the summer, working with children, doing whatever they can to the very best of their ability to making sure that all our children are feeling safe. But now we're opening, it's the 2021 school year. So we're ready to, launch again and excited to get ready to meet all of our new students, however that may be. If it's remote, if it's face-to-face, we're there for whatever challenge we're presented with. But what's important and most important is, what the well-being, the well-being of our children. And no matter what we do, I know that those first days, those first weeks perhaps, and then throughout the course of the year, we're going to make sure that our children's social emotional needs are also attended to, as well as their academic needs. And that's what we're here for tonight. Dr. Greg Wolcott is the author of Significance 72, Unleashing the Power of Relationships in Today's Schools. And he's going to talk to you just about that very topic and how we're going to be sure that every one of our children and their social emotional needs are met to the very best of our ability. So thank you, Dr. Wolcott, for being here this evening. And I'm turning this over to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Darlene, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about this topic, especially with our districts here in DuPage. And so we'll get started. And I kind of switched the title of the session tonight to kind of reflect some things that I've been hearing and going on and listening to over the last couple of months. And so the title that we'll go with for the presentation is COVID Slide, Enjoy the Ride. And so first of all, I need to thank all of you who jumped away from Shark Week to join us tonight. So thanks for being with us, and you can get back to your Shark Week activities later. First, you probably want to know who the bald guy is. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning in Woodridge School District 68. I'm the director of the Learner First Center for Social Emotional Learning, author of Significance 72, like Darlene said, former adjunct professor at Concordia University, principal, high school and college track and basketball coach, first, third, and fifth grade teacher, and the best title, dad. And so here are my two kids, and my first child, my son Jack. Jack's 13. He's all about fishing, all about boating and golf. And so he is dying, he just has to be outside all the time. Jack, had a little bit of a different experience in the spring with COVID. And as someone who's a very extroverted, it's been really hard for him not to have the level of interaction since social distancing began. He's really missed that level of interaction with his friends. And so he's really excited for that opportunity to come, but still, a little nervous. And as now school is looking like it's going to be remote, that's kind of created its own challenges. My daughter Maddie's 15. She is a sophomore at Oswego High School, and she is super, was super excited for school. Made the varsity pom squad, practiced her dance all summer, was really ready to go. And then all of a sudden we started learning that school may not be face to face, that it may be a hybrid model, and then it may be remote. And that's kind of changed her perspective and her thoughts on school, like so many others. She was really looking forward to one way of things being this year, and then that changing. So she's adjusting like so many of our kids, just through those a full range of emotions, so many emotions for our kids, and wondering, what's been lost, what could have been, all of these things, and that's normal and natural for our kids, and yet it's still something that affects them. And one of the things that surprised me, I think, most, with my own kids, was at the end of the school year last year, when it was time for locker clean out. And you probably remember those days, and we had to have kids come into school to pick out to get the things that had been left there so abruptly. And neither of my kids wanted to go. I mean, they were just like, "What? I don't want to go." My son is like, "I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going." And begrudgingly, he went. My daughter, again, she didn't want to go. This wasn't how my freshman year was supposed to end, and just that mentality was there. And when my daughter was there, it was kind of an interesting experience, because she was there cleaning out her materials, and she overheard some teachers talking. And one of the things that the teachers were talking about is the COVID slide, and she kept hearing them talk about the COVID slide, and because she is learning how to drive, we spent quite a bit of time, her driving and me sitting in the passenger seat as she gets her practice hours in. And she started explaining that to me. And she said, "Dad, what is the COVID slide?" And so I tried to explain to her that the COVID slide is this thought that because kids had lost so much school, that they were just going to fall into this situation where, they didn't learn anything, and that all this learning was going to be lost. And she's like, "Wait a minute. How do they know this is going to be worse?" She's like, "They've never done this before. No one has." And then as only a teenager could say, she's like, "Hey, school isn't the only way kids learn today." And she's right. School is very different now than how we learned. And our kids didn't stop learning because of this COVID experience. If anything, they may have learned more during this experience, because this is definitely a different time. If you think about these last couple months, and what have the kids learned, I think there was an actual COVID curriculum that our kids learned over the last 5 months, and I think it's taught them a whole lot. Obviously, from a language arts perspective, a lot of fact, opinion, and narrative has been learned over these last several months. From a social emotional learning perspective, empathy and resilience that has come out of this experience. From a health perspective, obviously everything with infectious diseases, contagion, hygiene, all these different pieces of why we have to wash our hands, how different germs are spread in different environments, huge real world experiences for them, of their learning. From a math perspective, too many statistics, too many percentages and fractions and numbers and things like that over this time that they learned. Obviously, from a social studies perspective, the racism, the social justice, and the turmoil that occurred during this time was definitely an eye-opening, time for my children, and I'm sure for many children around the United States and here in our county. From a creative arts perspective, think of some of the things that happened over this period. TikTok was all over, and I don't know about you guys, but every night I'm getting, my kids are texting me and sending me TikTok videos, and the kids on TikTok are so creative and coming up with so many neat ways to express themselves. Mask design. obviously is another piece that has occurred. And then, of course, science, endangered species. This, if you think back, this all, when we first went in the pandemic, it was all about the Tiger King and all of that. And I think there were some other endangered species like toilet paper also that we learned about during this experience. And so, yes, kids weren't in session like we once were. But over this last 4 months, this last 5 months, they definitely have learned a new curriculum, real world experiences that are really going to change them for a long time. Um, for us, though, I think we have to stop. And as we start moving forward, we really have to stop. Our kids have to stop. We have to stop really thinking so much about what's been lost. We have to stop thinking that all the things that our kids won't be able to do because of this crisis. Oh, you know they're starting fourth grade and they didn't do all that. There was a whole unit they didn't get to in third grade, and because of that this is going to happen or y is going to happen. And we get so worried. We have to stop thinking about it that way. We have to stop thinking about all that could have been, and instead start thinking about, well, what is, what can we do from this experience. Yes, it's normal to feel right now that our life is upside down. That's totally a normal experience for us. But how we choose to respond to that is going to be something that we're going to spend some time talking about today. How do we respond in order to model how for our students and our children, how they can learn how to respond? Yes, 2020, especially after the almost tornadoes last night in the county, has been pretty much a dumpster fire, and you just don't know what's going to happen next. But again, what can we do? I think when it comes from an instructional standpoint, we jump right away, naturally, to be thinking of all that kids haven't learned. And I think this graph from Ed Week really kind of tells that story. Tells us the story of how concerned educators, this was in June, how concerned educators are with how of the impact of kids falling behind. And again, I think that's a natural reaction for us to think about that way. But again, as much as it's a natural reaction, our kids did keep learning. The key for us as we move forward and we start this year is we can't let our past experiences start to place a ceiling on our future accomplishments. We can't think, okay, because freshmen usually learn this much, that this year's sophomores aren't going to be able to learn as much because they didn't have a full last year. We can't think that way. We can't think because kindergartners didn't finish that last month of school, that they're, as first graders, they're not going to be prepared, because we don't know, number one. And when we start doing that, number two, what happens is we start putting a ceiling on their learning. We're starting to hold them down, and we end up lowering expectations for students. And I know that's not something that any of us intend to do, but that's what happens. I think it's important to think about this experience and kind of put this learning, quote, learning loss in perspective. I've been really fortunate with the book I wrote that I've been fortunate to have people from around the world who've purchased it for their schools, and very blessed that a school in Japan purchased it, and to do it, and the headmaster there purchased it to do with a book study with his staff. And he and I were talking probably about a month ago about just this experience, and one of the things that, and how much this COVID slide, the impact of this is there could be, and I think what was really profound in talking to him is that when their schools there, because of the tsunamis, were wiped out, and they went months without having the school to the kids to go to the school, and they had to set up learning in different environments. He said, you know what, when they came back the next year, there was not the learning loss. That quote, learning loss was not there. He said the little learning loss that was there, he said the kids just picked up right away, and it was like a normal summer bounce back. And he said it was nowhere near the concern that had happened. What he did share, though, that the piece that did and was most impacted were those relationships, and the fact that the loneliness that happened from kids having lost their school, having not been able to see their friends, to have lost friends, all of those things. It was that social emotional impact, and I think that's the piece that we have to be most prepared for as we move forward this fall. Is how are we going to help our students with that? And I think the first step for us in that process of getting started is not being worried, not being embarrassed about what could happen. Our greatest obstacle to getting started is in taking on a challenge is our fear of embarrassment. Well, we have nothing to be embarrassed about. We have no fear of doing this wrong because no one has done this before. The only fear is us not getting started, and we've got to get started. We got to jump in and really enjoy this experience that's going to happen. And again, stop worrying so much about what could be and get excited about what possibilities we have. I think back to, and I'm definitely not the first who's made this comparison, but in the early '60s, Kennedy his challenge forth and said, look, as a country, we have to get ourselves to the moon. And he really pushed that moonshot thinking of, hey, this is what we need to do to be successful. And we're going to get there, but it's going to take all of us together. And because of that, the amount of innovation that was created in that short period of time, you know, created the innovation created things that we use today, tools and resources and electronics and computer, the initial parts of different computers. All of that started because of that challenge of Kennedy, when we had to come together as a nation to solve that problem. And I see so much of that right now in this experience. I see how New Balance, one of my favorite shoe companies, totally stopped doing what they had to do with their shoes and started making masks right away. How GM and different companies retooled their machines and started making ventilators. How we thought that it would take years to get through the testing for a potential vaccine, and now it looks like, hey, we may actually have some sort of vaccine through the trial phases by the beginning of the year. And so all those things we didn't think were possible, when all our scientists, when all of us as a country get together, great things can happen. And I think that is where we are on the verge right now in education. I think we've got this challenge. We as educators are prepared for this challenge. I know I've talked to Darlene and the others on the steering committee and ROE for social emotional learning that our county is prepared and totally ready to handle this social emotional stress, because we've been laying the foundation as a county for the last several years, and for almost the last decade. We've been laying the foundation, and now we have the tools. Now we've got this opportunity to go forward. And I think really as educators, we're going to be able to do great things. I truly believe that we're going to look back at education and think of what teaching was like before COVID and after COVID. There's teachers that I work with in my district and around the country who, thought Google Classroom was a room at the end of the hallway. They didn't know what Google Classroom is. And now here they're using assignments. They've created virtual classrooms. They have done all these different things to prepare for this coming year. And the cloud, what's the cloud? And now they're just utilizing technology so smoothly and thinking of ways. When we think of the old SAMR model that we used and talked about with technology, everything was substitution. Well, now they've just taken it so much further. And again, it's going to be that before, and there's going to be after. Experience is going to change, and we're going to be able to do things we weren't able to do. And so with that, we want to stop thinking of slide as a negative. It doesn't COVID slide as a negative. Instead, start thinking, hey, this is going to be a positive experience for us and a positive experience for our students. And I'm not going to lie and get too fired up on my caffeine and think that there's not going to be times when when it is going to be challenging. When we thought in my district we were going to be going 5 days a week. Next thing you know, we are going to go hybrid. Next thing you know, we are going to go remotely. And every time I'm trying to change the curriculum, and making sure that we can put staff in the best position to be successful. That's challenging, and we're going to have those times. But again, as a collective team, we're going to be able to move forward, whether we're spending the next couple months face to face with our students, whether in a hybrid or whether we're in a virtual setting. There's some things that I think that we're definitely going to need to be successful. And for me, there's 4 things, and I'm an acronym guy, so hang with me as I kind of share my acronym for this. First and foremost, we have to restore connections with and between our students. That is going to be our first thing. The second thing we're going to really have to do to be successful and make sure our students are successful in this experience is to really invest in social emotional learning and the self-care, and our own self-care. Because we're going to have some challenging times, and we're going to need to have ourselves ready to be our best for our students. We're going to have to draw upon students' strengths and interests in this experience, and we're really going to have to embrace this situation as an opportunity for growth. And so those are the 4 areas that we're really going to dive into for the next 45, 50 minutes. So when we think of restoring connections, there's a game I love to play when I am doing a face-to-face training or when I'm working with kids, and the game is called Race to 21. And so in this game, Race to 21, it's a partner activity. And let's say I was playing Darlene, and so Darlene and I are playing this game, and we're gonna alternately count to see who can get to 21 first. And so the rules though are, if I start and I say, I can either say 1 number or 2 numbers. So I might say 1, 2. Darlene then can say 1 number or 2 numbers. So she could say, she might just say 3, and then I'd say 4, and she could say either 5 or 5, 6. And so you can see how we'd go back and forth to see who can get to 21 first, and that's the winner. And kids love playing this game, and adults play it and have fun and laugh. But you'll start to see, as you play this with students or play this with adults, all of a sudden, you start seeing the same person win over and over again. And that person that's winning over and over again is generally because they have learned that even though this game is called Race to 21, the winner is the person who gets to 18. Whoever gets to 18 first, they determine the outcome of the game. If they get to 18, then they're in the driver's seat to say 19 or so that then the other or excuse me, so they're able to dictate the outcome. So they own the game. They're the winner really at 18. So even though we call it Race to 21, the winner is that person who gets to 18. And I think this is a powerful analogy as we think about relationships in our classroom and the environment that we have to create, is that we want student achievement. But think of student achievement as 21. We want student achievement. We want student well-being. That's 21. But again, we have to get to 18, and 18 is psychological safety. We have to create in our classrooms psychologically safe environments for our students. If we don't get to 18, or if we don't get psychological safe classrooms, there's no way we can win. Absolutely no way we can win if we don't get to that level. And so we have to focus on making sure that our classrooms are places where our kids feel free to ask questions, take risks, make mistakes, be their true selves without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or ridicule. That's the environment that we need to create. And this concept of psychological safety, really started picking up steam several years ago. Google, who we're all familiar with, Google commissioned a study to find out, it was called Project Aristotle, what were the ingredients of the best teams at Google? What did it take to be one of those best teams? Was it, you know, all engineers, a combination of engineers and problem solvers and critical thinkers and innovators? What is that? What were those team dynamics that really allowed the best teams to shine at Google? And what they found is the common element. Looking at all their teams, I think they looked at 180 different teams. The common element of the best teams was this idea of psychological safety. Their trust that you could take chances, that you could make mistakes, and that you didn't have to fear and be embarrassed. And so that, as my buddy Big Al says, so you all wondered what Al Einstein was rocking under that lab coat. Big Al Einstein says, I never teach my pupils, I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn. And that's the key for us. That's 18. We have got to create the conditions that kids can be successful. And if they don't feel psychologically safe, they're not going to take chances. If they don't have those relationships with peers where they don't feel that they're going to be, they don't have to worry about being ridiculed, they're not going to be successful. So we have to create those conditions. And those conditions are especially important when we want to create rigor in our classrooms, and when we want to push kids out of their comfort zone. We can't increase the academic tension or the rigor in a classroom until we first decrease that social emotional tension. If I am in a classroom environment and I'm worried about what somebody's going to think about me, or that someone's going to tell another kid that I asked a dumb question, then I'm probably not going to ask a question. I'm probably just going to sit back, and I'm really not going to get to the highest level of my thinking or my ability. And as a teacher, if you try to push me academically in that situation, you're probably not going to see my best. I'm probably going to give up. A lot of times when I first began teaching and I would ask questions, kids would just kind of back down and they just really wouldn't know how to answer. It's because I didn't have a psychologically safe enough environment. So if we really want to increase that academic tension, that rigor in the classroom, we've got to decrease that social emotional tension and create that psychologically safe environment. A colleague that I've been working with in the business world just wrote a great book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Tim Clark. And he describes these 4 stages of psychological safety. That first stage of safety is inclusion safety. That's where we feel that we belong. As educators on this YouTube event tonight, most of us are from DuPage County, so we are included in that group. So the first step is just making sure kids feel included in the classroom, that they're a valued member. Once they feel included and they're a valued member, then you can start feeling a level of what he describes as learner safety, meaning we are then able to really learn, take in information, and ask some minor questions. The third level of safety in the classroom is contributor safety. And contributor safety means now I'm really ready to share my thoughts on a subject, or my ideas on a subject. I'm able to contribute to a discussion and answer some normal types of questions. But then it's really not until I get to level 4 of challenger safety where the greatness happens in a classroom. And challenger safety is to the point where I can challenge, as a student, I can challenge the teacher and say, I don't know if I agree with that question, or with your answer on that, or your perspective. Or I can say to a peer in the classroom, no, you know what, I don't know about that. Or a peer can say that to me. That's the ultimate level of safety in the classroom. And for educators listening who who have done any work with Socratic seminar, you'll really know the success. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy in the background. Come on, go, go, go. Thank you. You'll really know the success of Socratic seminar based on if you get to that challenge or safety. If kids, a lot of times when Socratic seminar fails, it's because kids don't feel that they can have that conflict. And so they haven't gotten that. And so that's why we need to work on those relationships. When you think in some classrooms about who raises the question, raises a hand and asks questions, or are there questions going on? Unfortunately, so many schools say, oh, we need to teach kids how to ask better questions. No, we don't. Kids know how to ask better questions. The reason they're not asking those questions because they don't feel safe. So we've got to create that environment. And we know when we create that safe environment, critical thinking increases, creativity increases, innovation rises, the number of questions kids ask rises, and most importantly, all academic and non-academic outcomes increase when there's that safety in the room. You can probably, think of that. If you're on a Zoom call and you're on a Zoom call with your principal and colleagues, how safe do you feel when that green box goes around your face and it's your turn to share? Are you somebody who's ready, or are you worried about how you might be judged, and you're not really sure to take risks? And in many cases, what we're learning through this virtual experience is that it is kids. We need more psychological safety in the virtual world than actually less. Some people think, oh, because we're virtual, it's just, not that important. No, it's actually more important. We worry about it more. Think of the number of kids who, get extra paranoid about the background of their Zoom call, or who get nervous because their internet speed isn't as high, and therefore the reception might break out. Those are just some of the minor things, let alone what they might have on or what their answers are. So all of those things impact student safety. And we need to increase that between our students so they don't feel that sense of embarrassment. And so as we think of relationships, we want to realize that, hey, it doesn't matter if we're 6 feet apart, social distanced, 6 blocks or 6 miles, the greater there's any type of social distance, the greater the closeness is, the need for social closeness. We've got to develop and build that up. And so when we think of starting to create that psychologically safe environment and those relationships and restoring connections with students and between students, the first step is attachment. So we have to find ways to get to know each student and let them get to know us. And so as educators, what can we do in that first week of school, in that first month of school, to reach out and get to know every student, something about them, and make sure that they know something about us? That's got to be step one, is that initial attachment. Step two, as that is developed, we get to a point of attunement. And attunement is when we start looking at kids and we know them so well. This is what they're thinking, this is how they're acting, this is why they're acting, these are their interests, these are their yearnings. Once we know those things, then we can start really designing some engaging experiences for them. And then lastly, so we first are attached, then we're attuned, and finally we get to achievement. And that's where really we're able to empower kids, because we've created those experiences. And now kids are starting to accomplish things that they didn't even think possible. And so we've got to kind of think about that 3-step process to walk through. So some practical ideas and how we can do that. Some connection creators. The first one is self-disclosure. And we talked about this in the last webinar, that one of the last webinars we had. And as teachers, we have to introduce kids to us and make sure they can get to know us and tell things about them. If we're in face-to-face, teachers should have some type of me board in their classroom that really shows where they went to school, what their favorite hobbies are, what things they like to do for fun, what sports teams they root for. Because when we let somebody else into our life and share some things about us, they feel we care. And so that self-disclosure is the first step. So many of the teachers that are creating these virtual Bitmoji classrooms have been really cute, because you start seeing, as they are starting to add these different unique pieces, about them into the background. So the first thing we can do is really self-disclose and share some of those things about us. Then we want to find ways to get similarity, for kids to see the similarities that they have between us, and then similarities they have with other students. And so one of the links that I'll share later is to Panorama Education. And Panorama Education has what's called a Get to Know You survey. And it's a great survey for students in 5th grade on up. And a teacher goes in and they can fill out this survey, to kind of talking about, answering it themselves. Then they send the link of the survey to their children, and the students then fill out the survey. And when the students fill out the survey, the survey then comes back at the end and it says, okay, here are the things that you have in common with your teacher. What do you think you could talk to him or her about? And so it really is great for the kids to learn a little bit more about their teacher and then what they have in common. And then on the teacher's end, the teacher then sees, here's what he or she has in common with each student. And again, what kinds of things that they can talk about. And so those initial activities that we plan as we get back to school, that first couple weeks of school, have to be about opportunities for kids to develop these similarities with each other. It's also a time for us to share our vulnerability and talk about, show kids that we're real, show kids that we're human, that we make mistakes. I think of a teacher on a Zoom call with my son over in April, and I overheard the teacher saying, how you guys doing? This has really been a tough experience. I really miss my friends. I'm sure you miss your friends as well. And just the teacher admitting that those things, that he, was struggling as well, that's a huge piece, and something that really goes a long way for vulnerability and helps the children feel more relaxed. And those acts of vulnerability increase trust. We want to make sure that we have these virtual introductions. One of the things that we ask all the teachers in our district right now is, we're really not going to have curriculum night like we normally did. So everyone should be developing some type of welcome video that they can send out to students and to parents, describing them as a teacher. Again, some self-disclosure in there. What do they like? What do they not like? These different things. But there should be some type of welcoming video to kind of get kids jazzed up about coming to your class. Seesaw is excellent for that. Flipgrid, Buncee, those are some great resources and tools that we can use. And then once we start thinking of that and how we can build those connections, we want to take it a little bit step further and think of, okay, how are we going to individually greet every kid every day? What will we do to greet them? Because, we know that the first step to psychological safety is having them feel included, cared for, loved, respected. So what can we do? We've seen for years on Facebook, all these teachers that have these individual handshakes with kids as they enter the classroom in the morning, or these unique ways that, a high school coach I know who goes around and pre-COVID would fist bump every kid, look them eye to eye, welcome into class, and give them a fist bump. What are we going to do now in this COVID experience to continue to have some type of individualized greeting, even though we don't have that we have to abide by social distance guidelines? What about in the virtual world? When they come to our classrooms, what will we do? Will we individually greet every student by name as they pop up on the screen? Will we have, as a colleague of mine has done in Canada, where they started school already? She has already come up with individual um, uh, virtual dance moves that she does with every kid as they enter the room. What will be that way that you especially welcome kids so that they feel special when they come into your learning environment, and just not like I'm there. We want to take that further. And then we want to do that from an individual perspective, but then we want to do something that, again, creates similarities with peers, and really kind of starts to connect kids between kids. And so, could you do some type of welcoming to the class where you say, tell me something that you did for fun over the summer. Tell me the first place that you ate out when quarantine was over, and have kids share those things so they start learning about each other. Good old would you rather questions are awesome for getting kids started to think and to talk to one another. A lot of teachers right now that I've been working with, starting to play things like guess the gibberish with their students, and putting kids in the virtual world right into a Zoom room where they try to guess the gibberish with each other. A high school teacher that is turned out to be one of my go-to guys on things, and he is big on the minute to win it games, and during face-to-face instruction he always played minute to win it games, and when it came time for the virtual world he just kept that going. So every Thursday students have a quote ticket into the classroom, and that's the tools that they'll need for the minute to win a game. And so he'll say, all right, Thursday when you come to our virtual classroom, you need a solo cup and an index card. And then he shows them a game with that when they're there. All the kids in the virtual world are doing and on Zoom are playing that game, laughing at each other. Sometimes he has boys versus girls. Sometimes he has first half of the alphabet versus second half of the alphabet. But he just does a lot of fun things that just, again, help there to be some similarity, have kids laughing, have kids fun, a little bit of vulnerability, a lot of success. Games like that, icebreakers, rock, paper, scissors contests, all these types of things. Again, I've included there that you could use. Another teacher, she uses uses Padlet. And what she does is she says to students, all right, let's play, she calls it 3 truths and a lie. And so she has the kids send in 3 truths and 1 lie, and then she puts it up on a sticky note in the Padlet, and does that for every single kid. And then kids come during the week and they guess to see, all right, this person said that they have met 2 presidents, met a rock star, been to dinner with a famous musician, and swam with sharks. All right, now who could that be? And then kids would guess to see who that other person is, and they just love that activity, and the kids really end up doing that once a week, every week, start learning a lot of things about each other. And on my website, I've listed, you can go and significant72.com/resources, and there's a ton of other activities that you can do in either partner activities or large groups. Again, kids miss their peers. They want to have some activities with their peers. So other ways we can do, especially at the elementary school, can you do virtual lunch bunches or conference calls? Can you have kids write messages to each other? Wishes and things. One of the things that I saw a school do in the spring that I think is a wonderful thing that for us to go use going forward is cross-age reading buddies. And this school partners up 5th graders with kindergartners. And the principal sent me a picture of the kids as they buddied up in breakout rooms, all the each fifth grader with their kindergarten buddy. And, that had been a routine that they had done all school year, and they kept that routine going in the virtual world. And just a neat experience like that continues that feeling of connection. In the classroom, if we're fortunate enough to be face-to-face this year, we can continue to do small group and collaborative learning activities by doing some social circles where the kids still are standing 6 feet apart, but we go ahead and still have them do the cooperative learning activities. And that cooperative learning activities is so good for the fun aspect of it and the relationship building, but then how much we start to learn from each other. When we think about the racial turmoil that we had in this last couple months, we really talked and thought a lot about practices that are equity based and practices that weren't equity based. And one of the worst practices that we can use in a classroom is hand raising. If we're going to ask a single question, only a single person gets to raise the hand. Versus one of the most equitable practices that we can do in the classroom is any type of cooperative learning, where if the question is worth asking, it's worth a chance for everyone to answer. Other things that we can do with kids are top 10 lists, put them in breakout groups, have them, as a ticket into class, they have to answer these 10 questions, put them into a breakout room and share their answers to those with other kids. Some of those things are things that we can do. Collaborative brainstorming and activities using Google Docs is a great way. Put kids in groups and have them work from there. I love using programs like Jamboard, another one of my favorites. I love using programs like Jamboard early in the school year as a relationship building activity, where kids get to see, who likes dogs and who likes cats, for example, in this, so that they can learn the software tool or learn the technology tool, I should say, learn the technology tool in a relationship building perspective, so that then when it comes to an academic time, we can transfer it over. And so Jamboard is probably one of the best for using any type of choosing sides like this. Four Corners, that is a great cooperative learning strategy we use in the classroom and the face-to-face classroom, can work really well on Jamboard or in the virtual space as well. Another one of my favorites, and definitely my daughter's favorites, that she uses at her high school all the time, is GimKit. And GimKit is just an awesome quiz type of game that you can play, kind of Kahoot for grown-ups is what she calls it, or big kids. And it's just another great game that you can do so many of those question type things with, but it just has an added layer where you collect points, and you can use the points that you have gained to deduct from another team, and so it just adds and makes the competition more fun. So things like that. Things like Think Dots are again great activities for kids to get to know each other, but to use academically. And again, I want to reiterate the importance of the relationship with the students, and making sure that kids have those individual connections. My challenge to all of you, and the challenge for every educator that I work with, is, who are those two adults? Who are the two adults in every building that are going to be assigned to help every kid be successful? Not just one adult, two adults. Who are those two adults going to be? My son, during this COVID experience, watched the TV show Doomsday Preppers, where these people plan for the year, plan for these natural disasters to happen. And one of the things in their survival mentality, one of their phrases is, two is one and one is none. And I think that's so appropriate when it comes to relationships. Two adults is one adult, and one adult isn't enough. So who are those kids? Is it going to be the homeroom teacher and maybe the LRC director at the elementary school? Is it going to be the gym teacher and the homeroom teacher? Who are those two people going to be for every student? At the junior high, who are those two people going to be? The high school, who are those going to be? You know, many schools will go ahead and divide their staff up. A school I was working with last week, they have 1,200 kids in the school and 200 adults, including secretaries, teachers, assistants, and custodians. And so they work things out. So every teacher has 6 kids that they're going to connect with, you know, at least once a week. And so they say, who's got my 6? I got my 6. Here are my 6 kids. I'm gonna take care of them every week. Another high school that I'm working with, they call them first grade pals, and whoever the teacher is, they're in charge of all the kids, checking in every day with those kids, or excuse me, every week, with phone calls, emails, things like that with their first period students. So things like that are key. I shared in the last webinar a tool for a monthly calendar you could use. You know, several different ways. I think that the thing that we have to do is, you know, if we're going to talk relationships, and if we're going to talk that connections are important, then we have to walk it like we talk it. And we have to go ahead and set aside time this first month of school specifically, and then ongoing throughout the year to really build those connections. So first we have to reconnect. The second thing we have to do, if we're going to really turn this COVID slide into the COVID ride, is invest in social emotional learning and self-care. And we know right now that the statistics are terrible when it comes to the impact of COVID on students' mental health. We know right now that, you know, 30% of the kids are suffering, or excuse me, 70% of the kids in the Harris poll are suffering with some type of mental health in some way from this COVID experience. 61% of them have talked about having increased feelings of loneliness. 80% of the kids surveyed, over 3,000 or 4,000 kids, said 80% said they really find it hard to talk about this. 64% of the kids feel that COVID really is going to have a lasting impact on their mental health. 67% said they really feel the pressure to keep those feelings about their social emotional health to themselves. And we know that the worst thing we can do is play that game where we're trying to hold our feelings down, because it just makes it worse. That same percent, 67%, said they really have to pretend to feel better. It's so sad. What are we going to do about it? And I think where our challenge and opportunity lies in this, 79% of those kids said they wish there was an inclusive environment or safe space at school to talk about it. So we have to start learning from our kids, listening to their voice, listening to what they have to say, and figure out how are we going to help them with their loneliness? What are we going to do at school to help them? Because we know that you know, young children are 3 times more likely to develop depression from this loneliness. We know from research that's happened that the impact of this could last up to 9 years. And so we really have to focus on this, and not being at face-to-face in school and having remote starts is only going to magnify it. And where that is most worrisome to us is that the research from the Journal of the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry says that it's really the duration of loneliness that has the greatest impact. And if this stretches out and we're out of school remotely for the whole year, that's going to be a very long duration that we have to come up against. And so what can we do? You know, enough is enough. And so a friend of mine, Andrea Samadi, has a great podcast, social emotional learning podcast. It's called Neuroscience Meets Social Emotional Learning. And on it the other day, she had Maurice Elias, who is one of the founding members of CASEL and the director of Rutgers Social Emotional Learning Lab. And you know, Dr. Elias said a couple of things that really stuck out to me. The first thing he said is programs are necessary but not sufficient. And you know, so many schools have social emotional learning programs. And again, that's great. Those are necessary, but they're not enough. Not enough because as we've talked about in our last webinars, is that social emotional learning can't be Thursday at 2 o'clock. It can't be that one time. It can't be that one time. It's got to be part of every day in the classroom. Another thing he said is that I loved is he in this podcast, he said students have to live the skills to learn the skills. And so how do we help develop the skills in kids, and how do we put those into practice where they have to live them on a daily basis? Because once they're doing them on a daily basis, then they start to learn them. So we're big on teaching kids a 3-step process of recognizing their feelings, categorizing those feelings into emotions, and then coming up with strategies. This 3-step process of awareness, self-compassion, and self-management really helps students, take those 3 steps and apply them. If they are doing these 3 steps every day, they can apply them in different areas. Many of you are familiar with Mark Brackett in our county and his great book, Permission to Feel. And in his book, Permission to Feel, he goes through, and his whole ruler process is similar to that 3 steps. What makes these practices so important is that kids start to learn that emotions are just data and not directives, that this data is telling me something. This feeling inside of me is telling me something. What can I do about it? So in order to help students with that 3-step process, we can monitor those 3 steps or check kids' moods and have them live it daily by doing a mood check-in. And you can use Google Forms, and you can Google daily check-in, social emotional learning check-in, and you can find Google Forms, or you can just email or tweet me and I'll send you a copy of mine that can be used, that kids can check in. But every day kids can check in. You can use different posters. On the right, you see the emoji feeling faces and the popsicle sticks. And I know many teachers that during this virtual world are all set to start the school year by sending home popsicle sticks and little emoji faces. And so that kids, when they come on to their Zoom call or start their meeting every day, they can put up the popsicle stick that they're feeling. One of the teachers, she makes sure that, and I think this is kind of a nice practice because then other kids don't see it. She has the kids, look down at their table, grab the popsicle stick that shows their feeling, and then she has all the kids turn their back, but put the popsicle face to the screen so that she can see how kids are feeling, but they don't necessarily have to share it with one another. And so I think different things like that, again, it's getting them to live daily check-ins of how they feel. Some other great tools, closegap.org is a free tool that kids can do the same thing and do the same check-ins. Mark Brackett, as I mentioned, has the mood meter, which is awesome. And that's another tool that you can use to go through that process. But then not only do we want them to live going through that process every day in order to learn it, but we've got to help teach them the tools and the strategies that they can use. And so one of the schools that I've been working with in Canada, the school that's a kind of a year-round school, they introduce every week a mindfulness strategy, and they started out by using these mindful videos on Vimeo from Yo Mind, and the guy's name's Just Time, or that's the name he goes by, and these are videos that this gentleman comes and he shares and walks kids through a mindful listening experience. He walks kids through a balanced breathing experience, and so kids are walked through these experiences to start the class, but then they can transfer those outside. And so there's a lot of these healthcare things that we can do and strategies that we can use. Lots of them out there, you can do daily writings where kids are reflecting daily. It could be Mindful Mondays where you introduce the strategies, and then Tuesday, Teach Them Tuesday, have the kids share them with their parents. So a lot of ways that we can do that. And I added some slides in here from some of the other videos that you can go back and watch our last webinar on SEL tools that you can use that are helpful. Websites like Stop, Breathe, and Think have different body scan meditations. Go Noodle, go Zen, some of these things. But another part for us to be thinking of with that social emotional learning is making sure that we have structure and expectations in our classrooms, and whether that's our virtual classrooms or our regular classrooms, because structure provides social emotional safety to students. And so, what can we do? What structures at the elementary school? One of the routines that I really like that for people that I consult and work with is, the first five, and the first five is a staff routine where 5 minutes before the school day starts, you pause staff, and every staff member is kind of doing their own private thing to get ready for the day. That could just be listening to music. It could be doing mindful breathing. At one school, they have a group of teachers, they get together for a prayer for that 5 minutes, but it's doing what you need. That 5 minutes before the day starts is actually the first 5 minutes of the day. So as a teacher, are you ready to go? Soft starts, where kids come in and they have activities in the room that are a soft way to get them started in the day. Class meetings, are great in this to keep the routine going. Cooperative learning activities that have some type of connection activity ahead before you move into the cooperative learning. The SEL check-ins, wellness writings, and things like this are great. Another thing we can do to help kids, and this kind of combines the relationships with the social emotional learning, is think about our guidelines when kids come into our rooms. How do we can greet them in their room? And when they come into our virtual room, are we going to have them do some type of social emotional check-in? Are we going to have them do a mindful activity? What is the class size like? One of the things that we've been working a lot with schools in Canada and schools in Europe is how big the right size is for a Zoom classroom. And we're learning that 20 minutes with a group of 8 kids, 15 minutes with a group of 8 kids is 4 to 5 times more academically and socially emotionally impactful than if I have a whole class of students. So how can we break our class down so we only have 6, 8, 10 kids in the room? Increases their social emotional learning, increases our opportunities to interact, increases their student achievement. Do we give kids processing times in the small virtual room when we ask questions? Are we going to take breaks if we're going to have them for a longer period of time? Are we going to use breakout rooms? How are we going to celebrate? All of these are things that we should be thinking of when we have those virtual spaces. From celebrations, huge for social emotional learning, to feel good in front of your peers. A high school teacher went to the dollar store, and she bought all these hand clappers and sent those home with her homeroom class at the high school. And when she meets with that homeroom class, she does fun stuff with them. Another teacher who does cardboard high fives and has for social distancing these high fives that kids can do with each other. On my webpage, I have a whole bunch of these gratitude gifts where you go ahead and to celebrate kids, you put on a GIF on the screen and have the kids do the silly dance. Love the Google extension nod is just tremendous for helping. So a lot of different things from a social emotional perspective. Great free curriculum on the Greater Good Science Center. If you go to Greater Good in Education, their Science Center, they have free activities for elementary kids and teenagers that are just awesome to be using. Student surveys, things like that are great. We use a COVID survey where we ask parents to talk about their child, and we get feedback from parents. And again, if you email me or tweet me, I'll send you copies of this presentation and copies of the survey. We also do with students and adults a personal wellness pyramid. We know that there's 7 things that we really need to be successful and get personal wellness: connection, reflection time, play time, learning time, exercise, time outside, time to recharge. We need these 7 things. And so, we ask that teachers do that from a personal self-care, and then students do it. So reconnecting, investing in SEL, drawing on student strengths. How do we take a strengths view? And I've got to go through these fast, but how do we look at things from a strength-based perspective? From our class, what kids do well, what they bring to the table, what assets and experiences do they have to really help our shared space and experience and approve. I heard a lot last year in the spring of teachers who said, I saw a side of X student, that I had never seen before. If that's the case, then we really missed out in the face-to-face world seeing those students' strengths. And so how are we going to really get to know students' strengths? I use the acronym all the time, STORY, that every student has their strengths, their tendencies, opportunities, their resources, their yearnings, that all kids have these. And I need to know their story, and they need to know their story. So we have templates on my website that you can get for free where students identify their story. They share their strengths that they have in a class, things that they think they contribute, how they like to work best, what they need from their teachers, what resources that they have that can help in the classroom, and what their yearnings are. And so, that template is a great template. A high school, 4,000 student high school in Texas that we're working with, turn that story sheet into a Google form and is going to use it this year with all their students. And so activities like that are great to get to know students. One of my favorite activities that we've started and we've had kids do is we use the VIA character strengths survey. And so one of the things we'll do is we'll go ahead and pass out this template and picture on the right that has all the 24 strengths. We have students cut that up into little pieces, and then we have them share a story. So during COVID, here's something I went through that I had to overcome during COVID. So students share on Flipgrid a 2-minute story of something they went through during COVID. Then students choose, here are 3 strengths that in order to get through COVID that I did. And so students will post that up on Flipgrid. Then a colleague or another peer will come and they'll watch that strength story that you posted up there. So I'll watch your strength story, and then I will then add on to the story and say, okay, yes, I heard that you shared these 3 strengths, but I also think you used this strength, and this strength, and here's why. And we've learned how powerful that is for kids to not only recognize their own strengths in overcoming something, but hearing a colleague or a friend or a peer's strength, it's been so powerful. And we've done it with adults and students. It's just an awesome experience. We know that we need to raise the relevancy. We know that when we draw on student strengths, then we're able to really raise the relevancy in class. And we know how important that is because, students only tune in to one channel. What's in it for me? And so how do we get kids really involved and invested? We know when it comes to motivation that there's really 3 levels of motivation in the classroom: the don't have-tovation, the have-tovation, and the want-ovation. And we know the more autonomy, the more interest, the more choice that we can give kids, the more relevant that learning is, the more kids are going to fall in that category of want-ovation. And so, we learned from Edutopia in a survey that they did in the spring, that they interviewed teachers and said, what activities did most kids turn in their classroom? And the highest percentage of activities that students completed during the last summer of distance or spring of distance learning, the highest percentage were those that were autonomy based. So how do we take what we learned from them and use that this spring? And sometimes autonomy is just little things, giving students choice in task or technique or team or how much time it takes. Those are great ways to increase autonomy. Design thinking is another great way to increase student relevancy and interest and choice. And then lastly, as I start to wrap things up, we talked about, those, reconnecting with kids and building those relationships. We talked about investing in self-care and social emotional learning. We talked about drawing upon their strengths. But then, the last thing we have to do is really embrace this opportunity. And we're hearing over and over again everywhere, trauma, how traumatic this experience is. And there's no doubt this COVID experience in these last 5 months have been, trauma and traumatic for all of us. The illness that has come, the death, the employment loss, the racial turmoil. Yes, all of those things have been traumatic. And we know from, especially in this county, where all the great work we've done already around the ACEs surveys and the impact of trauma, we know how bad that traumatic how bad trauma is, and those traumatic experiences are on children, and the potential impact of that. But one of the things that we don't talk a lot about, at all, that we don't talk about, is, did you know that 90% of people report some form of post-traumatic growth? Yeah, of the people that went through and experienced trauma, 90% reported that they grew and had post-traumatic growth from that traumatic experience, right? You're like, wow, we don't talk about the growth that comes with trauma. Well, yeah, lots of growth. And post-traumatic growth, as defined by Tedeschi, is that psychological transformation and self-improvement that one undergoes following some stressful or challenging experience. We know that when people go through a traumatic experience and experience post-traumatic growth, they have a heightened sense of gratitude. They increase and have an increased feeling of emotional strength and resilience, that they've overcome something. They have stronger relationships. And they come up with feeling that they're stronger than they thought they were. And when I think of our educators and what they've been through from that traumatic experience in the fall, or excuse me, in the spring, and as they enter the fall, I think of so many teachers that have a heightened sense of gratitude and are thankful for the free technology that companies shared, the free internet that companies shared, the resilience and the strength that they have as educators coming through, how much they value the relationships they have with their peers and their colleagues during this situation, and how they really are able to do things technology wise or in other ways that they really didn't think they were capable of. I see this mindset in post-traumatic growth of, instead of what has been lost, to instead, what we've gained from this experience, what we can't do to all that we can do. This idea that, no, we're not a victim, we're really a survivor of COVID, and we really are able to do so much because we've survived this experience. I'm seeing and working with educators around the country and in Canada right now that are looking at this experience and really looking at all the newfound skills that they have, the new possibilities for reaching kids and engaging kids this year that they really never even thought of, but that now they are able to think of because of this traumatic experience, new pathways to success, and really new priorities of what it takes to help kids be successful. And the truth is, it's not going to be easy. Nothing is, but we're going to grow and learn from this experience. Again, we've got this as educators. We are going to be better as post-COVID teachers than we were as pre-COVID teachers. And I think of a book I read every year to my first graders, and it was called Fortunately. And the book was kind of laid out where there would be a page that would say, unfortunately this happened, but fortunately this happened. And I think of this experience, and I think, unfortunately this COVID experience came, and it really caused us to be socially distant from our students. But fortunately, it's made us realize how much more important relationship development is as we start this new year. Unfortunately, the data around around loneliness and mental health stress is really high. But fortunately, as a county, as educators, we have the social emotional tools needed to really help kids be successful, and that we can teach them to be successful and how to work with those emotions. Unfortunately, we really had an experience where learned how for years, because of the racial turmoil and systemic racism, we really didn't value and really build upon everyone's diversity and skills. But fortunately, because of that experience, we have a new frame in equity as we start this new year, and on how every student, regardless of their color or experience, what they bring to the classroom. And unfortunately, this experience caused us to really look differently in all that we do. But again, fortunately, as educators, we can embrace this opportunity and really have and experience some post-traumatic growth. So I definitely don't have all the answers, but I really have faith in the amazing educators that I work with daily, that I collaborate within our county of DuPage and around the globe, that we're really going to find a way for all kids to be successful this school year, and not only experience high levels of academic achievement, but social emotional achievement. So, I threw a lot at you this last, hour and 15 minutes or so, but hopefully I pushed you to think of some things differently, and look forward to collaborating with you and the county further, and really just hope that our goal as educators is that we unleash our own awesomeness this year, but that we also unleash the awesomeness inside every single child that we work with. So I appreciate you spending this time with us tonight, and hopefully gave you some ideas. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. Email me at greg@drivelearning.org, and I'll be glad to send you copies of the presentation and other resources in any way I can to help your students have a great year. So thank you, and have a great night.
Greg, and I just want to say, fortunately, in DuPage County, we're very glad to have you here. This is really great, really, really great. And it was inspirational. It was positive. You gave great resources, great strategies. I just, you just energized me for the night. So this is not just for the night, for this school year. So thank you. And thank all of you for joining us. And you've got, Greg will have this posted on our YouTube channel. So I know I'm going to be viewing it again. That's how much I really valued it. And we'll make sure this gets out there. We also do have an SEL network, so please feel free to join us on our SEL network, which is, again, you can just email dupagestrong@dupageroe.org. And I just want to wish every educator out there just the very, very best school year. You're absolutely right, Greg. We've got some of the best and brightest teachers in the world. So you know what? Remember that every single day. So thank you all. Sleep well, everyone. Take care. Thank you again, Greg.
Thank you. Have a great night.